We have been working on trying to create what we hope is going to be the best map app in the world. That's what Eddie Q, Apple's Senior Vice President of Services, told Matthew Panzerino of TechCrunch, who scored the exclusive sneak preview of Apple's all-new next-generation maps. Taking it to the next step, this is building off our own data from the ground up. Once upon a time, Google made Apple an offer it thought they couldn't refuse. Give us access to all your customers' location data and let us serve them ads and maps, or do without critical features like vector tiles and turn-by-turn navigation. But Apple did refuse, and hard, and that meant the clock was suddenly ticking on Apple Maps. Fast. Apple had always made the Maps interface on iPhone and had been considering building its own Maps data for a while. Almost certainly, though, it thought it had more time. Now it was in a mad dash to rip out Google and replace it in time for the launch of iOS 6. So Apple had to license all the data it could from TomTom, OpenStreetMap, Yelp, and others. Because the data all came from different companies, it was all in different formats, and Apple's aggregation, cleansing, and coherency did not go well, and in many places it went terribly. There were flashy new features like flyover from companies Apple had acquired over the years for its eventual Maps project, but it had no way yet to replace old ones like Street View, and with all the petty fiefdoms involved, it took years to even get transit back. As a result, the director in charge of Maps, who previously spearheaded the hugely successful mobile Safari project, was let go, and Tim Cook was compelled to issue an unprecedented apology. Around the same time, though, Apple began ramping up an entirely new Apple Maps project. It's hard to remember now, but Google Maps wasn't created overnight or in a vacuum either. Back in the day, there were only two real map providers, TeleAtlas, which became TomTom, and Navteq, which became Nokia here and is now owned by a consortium. Google licensed its maps like everybody else, until it could redrive and remap the world in its own image and do it better than anyone had ever done it before. Apple has the same lofty aspirations, but its definition of better includes fierce protections for user privacy. The data for the new Apple Maps is being collected in three primary ways. From high-resolution satellite imaging, from specially outfitted Apple Maps vans that have been driving international roadways for years already, and from the billion-odd iPhones that all of us carry every day as we drive, walk, ride our way through the world. From the satellites, using computer vision, Apple will be able to add much more detail on everything from parks to paths to pools. Right now, Google has trails and sports facilities. Apple doesn't. That's going to change. From the vans, Apple is building super high-resolution panoramas and a points cloud that maps the world in a full 3 dimensions. That lets maps see under things like tree canopies, which can block satellites, verify addresses, accurately account for lanes, model the real-world shapes of buildings, match the graphical representation of local street and road signs, and nail points of entry. While Apple seldom discusses future products, it also positions them for features like Google-style Street View and augmented reality directions, and even prefetches data for enhanced and autonomous technologies, including the long-rumored glasses and Titan projects. From all the iPhones and all the pockets and hands, Apple will be able to get real-time flow data, which is key to understanding everything from newly opened routes to construction and accidents affecting traffic, up to the second. Think Waze, but without having to share your personal location data with Google. That's the biggest part of all this. Through every step and layer of the process, the new Apple Maps was architected with privacy in mind. For example, all the Apple Maps van data is encrypted and sanitized to remove faces, license plates, and other individually identifiable information. Data from iPhones is segmented with the start and end points thrown away, and only random de-identified parts from the midpoints used to probe for new routes and traffic. And you can also opt out of that in settings privacy if you really want to. At iPhone volumes, that means Apple Maps can know how people are navigating without having to know where and how any individual person is coming or going. And because Apple's A-series processors are so powerful, it can add any personal context it needs on device. In other words, you don't serve the cloud serves you. Also, because Apple believes machine learning by itself is only ever half an answer, Maps will be using human editors, just like App Store and News, but in the hundreds. It'll use them to sanity check and make corrections, which, because Apple will no longer have to loop through a host of other companies, will be handled much, much faster. And yes, search is also being improved so that, searching from something local doesn't prioritize a result 3 continents away. What this means for us is better detailed, more accurate, more relevant, and eventually more feature-rich maps that let us stop having to worry about or figure out what they're telling us and let us enjoy the drive, the walk, the ride, knowing we'll get exactly where we need to go. And the reason Apple is doing all this is simple. Maps and location are critically important. Just go into your iPhone's preferences, look at location settings, and see all the apps that make use of location all the time. In the past, having maps were table stakes. In the future, having the best maps possible are going to be the key to unlocking everything from persistent AR environments to self-driving cars. And Apple doesn't just want to be there, Apple needs to be there. And frankly, we need them to be, if for no other reason than to give us all a choice between the big internet companies that need all of our data and Apple, who wants as little as possible to do with it. That way, there's more options and better competition for everyone. We don't think there's anybody doing this level of work that we're doing, Q told Panzer. We haven't announced this. We haven't told anybody about this. It's one of those things that we've been able to keep pretty much a secret. Nobody really knows about it. We're excited to get it out there. That's an ambitious thing to say, even audacious. Given the history of Apple Maps, I'd much prefer Apple underpromise and overdeliver here. In fact, I'm not going to believe any of this, not even a little, until Apple proves it, until the new maps ship and we get a chance to hammer on it hard. That'll start this week in the Bay Area of California, including San Francisco and Cupertino. Over the course of the next year, it'll hit the rest of the US and then keep going internationally. Meanwhile, I'm going to study as much as I can about the technologies underlying the new maps. That includes semantic segmentation and deep Lambertian networks, which honestly sounded made up, but it's all part of machine learning and is legitimately fascinating. Brilliant has a course in artificial neural networks that includes perceptrons, multi-layer perceptrons, backpropagation, convolutional neural networks, recurrent neural networks, and other subjects that enable me to read Apple's ML blog without near constant expressions of shock and confusion. Best of all, because Brilliant is sponsoring the show, you can sign up for free at brilliant.org/vector, and the first 200 of you who do can get the premium courses for 20% off. Thanks, Brilliant. Google was doing what it felt best for its business, trying to secure even and ever more data so it could build the Star Trek computer of its dreams. Apple had to make a choice, maintain maps or maintain privacy. Did Apple make the right choice then? Is it making the right one now? How do you feel about Apple Maps? Do you trust it? And if not, will you give it a second chance when you get the new version? Please hit like, please hit subscribe, and then let me know in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching.
Boom. That's where we are now. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go look for something. I'm going to certainly want a cup of coffee afterwards, so I'm just going to look for Starbucks, right? Starbucks. So I'm going to search for Starbucks, and sure enough, there's all the Starbucks. Now, I can get a list of Starbucks here, so I can pick that one if I want, and I can even go look at that Starbucks, and there it is, and let's give them a call.
Good morning, Starbucks How can I help you?
Yes, I'd like to order 4,000 lattes to go, please. No, just kidding. Wrong number. Thank you. Bye-bye. Okay.